Hey guys, John here for our next installment of Fireside Chat. Oddly enough, I don't have the fire going yet. I'm going to do the fire after I record the video because I wanted to get this recorded first. You know, I've had a lot of questions come into me lately about the whole idea about, casting changes, whether it's, changing characters from one ethnicity to another, one gender to another, from an older version of a story to a more contemporary version of the story. For those of you who followed me for a long period of time, like say going back to the movie blog days, you guys will know that I have never really cared one way or the other. I really don't care if a new version of a story changes an ethnicity, changes a gender. I really don't care. It's actors play characters they are not. And films are just art. They're not history, unless you're making a documentary, I guess. And every piece of art is an artist telling their own interpretation of something. And so I've never really cared. I mean, again, go back to my all-time favorite TV show, Battlestar Galactica. I didn't care that they turned a black Colonel Ty from the original Battlestar Galactica series into a white Colonel Ty in the new one, nor did I care that they turned a male Starbuck into a female Starbuck. The end result to me was, it was the greatest television show of all time, and it was just a new storyteller telling their version of it, which means there are going to be changes and there are going to be differences. And to me, that's okay. Anyway, that philosophy of mine, I think one of the things it was rooted in was, if I remember correctly, and maybe I'm not, it goes back to like around the Gamergate era. And I remember this one guy, and I feel bad that I don't remember the name of the site or the outlet or the blog, but I remember one guy was writing about it at the time. And he said this, and this has always stuck with me. He said, if you're writing for a blog, because I don't think, YouTube was a thing at the time, but if you're writing for a blog, you have to ask yourself this question. Does the content I'm making welcome people into our fandom? Or does the content I'm creating telling people they're not welcome in our fandom? And that's always been a thing that has really stuck with me. It made an impact on me, especially today when we're talking about the movies. I do these things called movie meetups, where I travel around the country and I meet up with movie fans at movie theaters. And I'm always floored by the sheer diversity of the people who are our fellow film fans, both nationalities, ethnicities, genders, all that kind of stuff. Always floored by the sheer range of diversity and the excitement people have of being film fans. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that quote came back into my head in my most recent movie meetup trip when I was meeting with this Indian family, and like there was mom, dad, two little girls. I just loved being at the movies. It's too bad the movie was Mandalorian and Grogu, but whatever. And they just loved it. And for some reason, walking away from that night, I remember thinking about that quote again. Does your content tell people that they are welcome in our fandom, or does our content tell people they are not welcome in our fandom? And listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that I have never once had an issue with a change or with a casting decision. For example, this is a silly one, but it's one that comes close to home for me. When they cast Chris Pratt to do the voice of Mario, there are not a lot of Italian characters that either aren't in the mafia or not named Rocky Balboa in films. I mean, there are some, but not a lot. And to me, it's like, here we have the most Italian of Italian caricatures in Mario. It's a me, a Mario, right? As an Italian, I love Chris Pratt to death. But as an Italian, I thought it probably would have been a good idea to get an Italian to do the voice of Mario. So sure, was I a little irked by it? Yes. But did I go, well, then I'm not going to go see this movie, or I hate this movie, or I want this movie to fail? No. Right? Yeah, did I take umbrage with it a bit? Yes, I wish they had done it a different way, but the storytellers and the people making this movie, this was their version, and this is what they were going to do. So fine, guess what? There have been other versions of Mario. In the future, there will be more versions of Mario. And sometimes it'll be an Italian actor doing it, and sometimes it won't. And that's okay. It's the same reason I didn't get mad at Quentin Tarantino for Inglourious Basterds for having the audacity to rewrite history. For those of you who may not know your history, a little spoiler alert, Adolf Hitler did not die in a movie theater fire, just so you know. But Quentin Tarantino wasn't trying to rewrite history. He was telling a story. He was telling his story, a version of his story that looked at history a little bit differently. And in his version of history, Adolf Hitler died in a movie theater fire. Or even if you look at the events of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that's not how it went down. Quentin Tarantino wasn't disrespecting history. He's just an artist telling a story and telling his version of the story. But it's art. He wasn't changing history. He wasn't changing identity. He was just telling a story as an artist. And that's why, to me, whether you're taking, if you're doing Gods of Egypt and like, there are very few roles for people of different ethnicities, so why pack that one full of white people? Sure. But it's just them telling a story. Do I take a little bit of umbrage with it? Sure. But was it enough for me to go, well, then I'm not going to see Gods of Egypt? Well, I wish I hadn't because the movie was terrible, but that's besides the point. And so, like, when you get to something like Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, which is now his highest audience-rated movie of his entire career, for non-comic book films, it's the highest grossing R-rated film for an opening weekend in history, all that kind of stuff. Is Helen of Troy traditionally portrayed as a white woman? Yeah, but the lady who played Helen in Troy wasn't Greek either. It's just that her skin happened to be white. Christopher Nolan isn't trying to rewrite history. He's just telling one of 5,000 versions of the Odyssey. And in his interpretation, he decided that Helen was going to be played by Lupita Nyong'o. Okay, and maybe you like or don't like that decision. That's fair. But I don't understand why we take then major issue with, hold on a second, I accidentally got tracking here on my face. Why we would take such major issue to the point we would hate the film for doing it. Again, he's not changing history. There are 50,000 other versions of the Odyssey. There's going to be 50,000 more in the coming decades. And in Christopher Nolan's version, he told it that way. And to me, when you look at the history of Hollywood, which has, by Hollywood's own admission, been incredibly racist and been incredibly holding on to an agenda of exclusion for a century, where all the previous roles that came were only allowed to be white, at least the vast, vast, vast majority of them were ever only allowed to be white, why not, if we're retelling some older stories, get rid of that agenda of exclusion and say, we're going to open up the roles to a bunch of different people now? Again, I understand saying I agree with that decision or I disagree with that other decision, like I disagreed with having Chris Pratt play Mario, but it's not enough for me to go, well, then this filmmaker shouldn't be allowed to tell their version of the story. To me, it always comes back to, is the content I'm making, and I'm sure I fail at this sometimes, maybe a lot, is the content I'm making the type of content that makes everybody feel welcome in our fandom, or is the type of content I'm creating the type of content that tells people they're not welcome here? And I think that's an important question, and one that I hope I'm always asking myself. Anyway, that will wrap up my thoughts for tonight. Now I'm going to get my fire going and hang out here by my pool tonight for a little bit before going to bed. My name is John Campea, and I'll talk to you guys next time.